Orange Pill Investor. I forgot to queue up any music and only realized it during the countdown. I was like, oh shit, I don't got nothing. Um, Maybe some good Sky is Falling music. But so I was, I've been lamenting the absence of volatility, but more like really the implied vol because I'm an options guy. And we're getting a healthy dose of some volatility now, right, guys? And I think I think people are realizing maybe it's just not their cup of tea. And so I put together this terrible, terribly constructed meme, and I could have tried to like spent a few hours trying to figure out how to Photoshop some shit real good, and then I just thought, you know what, a half-assed cookie cutter meme would be more appropriate for the production level that I put into this show. So I kind of liked it. I actually think it makes it a little bit more funny, the fact that it's like obviously terrible. And I've been seeing some people. So there's Twitter's all freaking all over the place, and they're like, "Oh, I can't wait to see how the True North guys try to spin this one." And I've got a couple of points, so I will definitely not disappoint in that vein. So if you if you want to see how sailors dick riders are about to spin it, I got it. I got it all panned out for you. So I think the first problem that people have is they have this kind of like hero worship complex with Michael Saylor, and that he can do no wrong, and he went to MIT, and he's an engineer, and he's like engineering and shit. And I like to say some of that stuff too, but like, I mean, he's a fucking dude, right? I met the guy. I was a little starstruck. I kind of asked him like a half-assed question when I got to meet him at a in New York, and so I didn't come through with the most poignant like interaction with the guy or anything. But I mean, he's a fucking guy. He's insanely smart, but that doesn't mean that they won't make some dumbass decisions. And I forget, I should have researched it, but there's one of my favorite quotes is make decisions quickly and change them slowly. Probably read it in one of those self-help books, or Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, or How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of those fucking books, or some interview. I don't know. Somebody says that shit, and I kind of liked it. So this is definitely a mistake, though, right? So they came out with the guidance, and then instead of just kind of sticking to their guns, they were like, "Oh, damn, we should have given ourselves an out here." And so then they're like, "Well, we need this out because we're the ones looking at the metrics, and maybe we'll know better than locking ourselves into this guidance whether we need to ATM outside of the framework or whatever." But I think the original mistake was publicizing the framework in the first place. Like, I don't mind that it exists, but keep that slide out of the slide deck. Let it be proprietary, because I thought it was kind of funny that Sailor was listening to the people complaining about giving the short sellers too much exit liquidity. Just lay off the ATM and let the price run. And then they come out with this framework. But the problem with publicizing it is now the short sellers have an absolute blueprint. There's like no guessing game whatsoever. You at least need them to have the fear of God that they might lay off of the ATM, but you don't want them to know when. And so I think it just kind of even the clip where Sailor said, "Hey, we get it. If you think we're hitting the ATM at 500, you don't want to be buying the 600 calls." Okay, that was absolute. That like displayed understanding of the problem. However, publicizing the framework demonstrates a misunderstanding, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you say we're going to do it under 2.5 MNAV or whatever the hell it is, because it's going to be pretty easy for these short sellers to calculate. Like, maybe you make the 600 strikes more appealing, but if they can just calculate, okay, 2.5 MNAV is the 750 strike. Well, now I know I can buy the 600s, but I can sell the 750s. And so yeah, I think the original and major mistake was just publicizing something that should have been proprietary. I know they want to be the most transparent, and we've been kind of like singing his praises because they've got all the metrics on the website, and the MNAV and the KPIs and the yields and the all that bullshit. But yeah, this is a little bit of information that I would have liked for them to keep to themselves. And so I was kind of surprised that the people who had been clamoring for Strategy to lay off the ATM and let the price run were happy about the guidance being made public, when it kind of just almost drops like the short seller's manual into the hands of the enemy. It's almost kind of like when you're trying to put out information of how to stop criminals from doing a certain thing, where you're kind of like telling them the steps that you're going to put in place to stop them, so then they can just kind of like plan around those things. So there's a certain level of the security that you kind of have to keep to yourself. So I think that people put Saylor up on a little bit too high of a pedestal, and so he's either like the greatest thing since sliced bread, or he's the worst thing ever, right? So he can be nowhere in between, and it's kind of like an all or nothing thing. And depending on whether he's saying and doing the things that you want to hear, he's the angel on one shoulder, and if he bungles this revision of the framework, now he's the great Satan or whatever. Yeah, it was a mistake, but I don't think it was the biggest mistake. I think putting it out in the first place was the bigger mistake, and this kind of actually makes it better. I think this is a necessary correction to kind of screwing up and putting that guidance out in the first place. If the guidance locks them in, then everybody they're just too predictable, and the makers can manipulate things, and the short sellers and the fudsters and all of that bullshit. So I actually like the get out of jail free card better than the original announcement. I wish it would have come out this way to begin with. So, they screwed the pooch on that one. I will admit that. But, for me, I just go back to the basics. Does this change my overall thesis on strategy? No, they're going to be executing the strategy, the infinite money glitch, the speculative attack on the dollar. It's, it's more efficient than it ever was. And in 5 or 10 years, they're gonna be in the Magnificent 2 at the top of the S&P 500 with Tesla. So, and everybody else will be in the rearview mirror, and you won't be able to see them through a fucking telescope. So, I kind of just don't really care. I know some people are just freaking out about it. Oh my God, he lied, and I'm really just not all that bothered. But I don't know if that's just because I'm right or wrong, or whether I try just not to worship flesh and blood human beings and then become insanely disappointed when they do not follow I'm not following the footsteps, but not or yeah, when they fall short of expectations. I think that's kind of the way to put it. So, but the whole point of the title of the video is you wanted vol, you're getting a healthy dose of vol. But the bad news is, as in the tank as the sentiment has been, right? If we're gonna get a September, October, November pump, like what do we need to see it happen? Because it would be nice if this was the bottom, and I see people posting they full ported to the fucking this or that faster horse, whatever, and that's all a bunch of bullshit too, right? So I like sports ball sometimes, and one of the things that the sports guys piss me off. You can tell that they haven't really formed, even though they're supposed to be experts, they haven't formed an expert opinion on something, and they just say these little cute phrase words, and they just say the same thing about the same athletes over and over, right? Peyton Manning was the best quarterback, except he can't win the big game, right? He chokes in the big game. Then they said the same thing about fucking LeBron James. He's the best basketball player on earth, but he can't win the big one. Well, that shit's only true until they win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 championships, right? It's just laziness. And so if you see people saying, oh, I full ported over to this because I think it's the faster horse, what the hell does that even mean? Like, you heard somebody else say something was the faster horse, and so now you're just using that as a justification to do, to chase whatever. And it's kind of clear that none of that shit is based on like metrics, right? If you look at the metrics of any of these upstart companies, it's like, okay, based on risk adjusted metrics, who's in a stronger position here? So the good news for me, at least, and it's not financial advice for anyone else, but every dip is a buying opportunity as far as I can see. But the bad news is 340 doesn't really look like capitulation to me. I don't like, as bad as the sentiment is, it's probably got to get a whole lot worse. So what would make it worse? And if you look, I'm not like a super duper chart guy, but the market does have a memory. And I think those memories, you can kind of look at support and resistance to a certain extent. We got to go all the way back to March 25th to find 340 as a point of resistance. So hopefully this resistance here will be support. Now, that's not really like enough to springboard us on its own, I don't think. So I think strategy is still kind of dependent on on Bitcoin, right? If Bitcoin rips, strategy rips, and I think everybody understands that. But for strategy to kind of springboard due to a reversal of capitulation on its own, it would not surprise me if we saw 250 again, right? If 340 doesn't hold, maybe we hold on to 300. There, maybe there's a shitload of limit orders at 300, where people would just buy in. There's a pretty good amount of support here, right? It was 300 before it took off to 450 or 420, excuse me, and then 450 later. So there's plenty of support at the 300 to 340 level. But we triple bottomed at like 240, right? What was this? Yeah. And so really, we haven't really seen that level. We haven't even really double bottomed. From 450. So, the good news, at least for me, even though, of course, my account is suffering greatly over the last week, is that my long-term thesis hasn't changed even a bit, but I did mention yesterday that I'm the most worried. I'm the most worried about my December 1080s than I've been in quite a while. Um, because even if we get like an October pump, that will be too late for me on December's because I will already have rolled my December's out to January, February, March, somewhere between January and March. So if we don't get a pump in the first half of September, then my December 1080s are already a lost cause. Um, so Bitcoin has to like the Bitcoin gods have to deliver in the next 2 to 3 weeks for my 1080s to have any hope of salvation. And I try not to be optimistic or pessimistic. I think that's one of the pillars of an option seller's mentality is we're never so optimistic that we just won't sell a covered call against it. And but I think I probably do have some emotional trading scars because in March 2024, I was a little too short. And so I missed out on some upside here. And I think that caused me to be too long after November, right? Because I remembered missing out on upside here. And so when we hit 400-500 a share in November, I thought, oh, well, it's going to go to 750 or 1,000. I got to keep all these long call positions and roll up to the roll up to the 800s, roll up to the 900s, roll up to the 1080s. And that was a big mistake. So I missed out the opposite of March. I made the opposite mistake in November of rolling in and not being short enough or not taking my insane profits and taking my ball and going home. So I think the March mistake caused me to overcorrect and make the opposite mistake in November. So hopefully third time's a charm. If we get some kind of pump to between, I don't know, 800 and 1,200 strategy price, if the market gods decide to heed my prayers, then my plan is to basically just unload all of my leverage at that point. So hopefully it's a little bit of a three bears theory. This porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold. Maybe the third time I'll get it just right. That would be nice. But the market loves to inflict pain. And I saw some hilarious shit in the the irresponsibly retarded group that popped up. And the original saying is, the market can stay irrational for longer than we can remain solvent. And somebody said, we can remain retarded longer than the market can stay irrational or some shit like that. That person needs to be on stage because that was comedic genius. But anyway, so that's the good news. That's the bad news. That's the strategy. That's my strategy fanboys take on how to spin that negative into a positive. If you were looking to see how I was going to shill it, that's my best case. That's all I got for you. So let's check the chats, and then I'm definitely going to be making some trades today because all my positions are fucksword. Glad you appreciated it, 21 mil. What's up, Tony? Let's see. Lots of people bearish now. Sentiment low. I think we're close to a bottom. Yeah, there's people talking about they fully ported over to some of these upstart companies. Like, I at least get when people decided that they wanted to move a sizable position over to Metaplanet, because like Dylan is clearly executing well, right? So you can make that argument that they're led well. Number two, they're close to strategy. They're studying at the feet of the master or whatever, right? They got it figured out. They're in a separate market. There are some certain advantages I think that they have over there. Um, the moving warrants, that I think there's some benefits to that, but I'm really just kind of talking to my ass right now. I don't know the ins and outs of Metaplanet, but the point is, you could at least make an argument that they're kind of in a silo in Japan and they're the clear winner, in their area. And I kind of get that. And Dylan was even an original founding member of True North in the first place. He was on the first couple of episodes, I believe. And so totally switched on, dude. And it was pretty cool. I got to shake his hand in Vegas. Was it Vegas or yeah, Vegas. Um and he's been a respected Bitcoiner even before that. Like people who I know on X were actually saved financially because he was blowing the whistle on one of those companies that you can stake your Bitcoin for yield. Celsius maybe. Anyway, he was sounding off about stuff like that. So he's got a serious Bitcoiner street cred, basically, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of these newer companies, they're they they give a little bit of credence to the Bitcoin only people who call Bitcoin treasury companies shit coins. Like some of these new Bitcoin treasury companies are legit shit coins. And they're the companies are formed by shitcoiners, for fuck's sake. Like um, if you've got shitcoins at your conference and then you form a treasury company, but you're like coming from the shitcoin space, like yeah. Julie Millard talked about authenticity on her interview with Tim at his digital conference marathon, and that's what some of these companies severely lack is authenticity, right? If you're an Ethereum um, or any of these shitcoin guys, and then you just come over and like, oh yeah, we're just going to form a Bitcoin treasury company and ride on the coattails of the legit companies, and a lot of people are going to get swept up into that. So um, I get that people moved some of their money to Metaplanet because that was at least, I think there were credible arguments that could be made for those. But when you see people saying that they're going to fully port, they're going to fully port over to some of these other companies that have no street cred whatsoever, and some of the cred that they have is like shitcoin adjacent. Like that's like a serious um that's getting close to bottom signal, I think. But unfortunately, it could get a lot worse before it gets better. So I'm just going to continue to execute the plan. And I think someone mentioned like, hey, they really appreciate that I don't get too emotional, especially when the price of the stock's going against me. And part of what makes that a little bit easier is because I already know what I'm going to do in any situation. As long as my underlying thesis hasn't changed, then there's really only a couple of things that I need to plan for. The price of the stock can either go down, stay the same, or go up, right? There's only three things it can do. And so I already know that if the price goes down enough, I will try to add some leverage. As long as I still think we're in the Bitcoin bull cycle, I will try to add some leverage. And if the price goes up a certain amount, I will take some of that leverage off, some or all, maybe, right? If we get another face melting rally for Bitcoin and strategy, I will take off all of my leverage. Now, if the price of strategy stays down or low for the next 5 months, beginning of January, I will no longer be waiting for a pump, right? If we don't get the pump in October, November, December, I'm just going to call the bull market over, and I'm just going to go back to shares. No leverage, none of these long calls. This whole long call section right here, bye-bye. If I lose every single dollar of this money, I'm not just going to revenge bet and buy the 1080s in June of 2026 when I think the fucking bear market is coming. I'm done. I'm done doubling my bet on black at the roulette table, right? But I think there's still tons of catalysts, right? Fed might lower rates. Summer's about to be over. Maybe all the traders and all the liquidity comes back. There's potential for S&P 500 inclusion. So there's lots of things to be optimistic about. Even if the Bitcoin bear market does come back, like, is S&P 500 inclusion enough to buoy the price of the stock? I kind of doubt it. But, I will have some kind of core shares position that I'll hold through the next 2 years, even if the price craters 75% or something stupid. Because I'll be selling covered calls against it the whole time, and it won't completely alleviate the losses on paper. It'll just be paper losses because I won't be selling the shares, but it'll soften the blow somewhat. So we'll see. I don't know the exact figure, but I would say I probably have about 2,500 to 3,000 delta worth of strategy now. So somewhere between 1,000 to 3,000 shares of strategy I'll probably take with me into the bear market, the potential bear market, what I'm assuming to be a bear market. All right, let's check the chats and then let's make some trades. What's up, Grit? Bears everywhere, and I'm sitting here laughing right now. Did my research months ago, and the only thing that has changed is an increase of 369,000 Bitcoin added since 11/11/24. Dude, I was looking at it yesterday, and I just pulled up November alone, and if Grok is correct, it was like 130 something thousand Bitcoin just in November. So for all the people who are pissed off about, oh, they hit the ATM and we could have hit $1,000 a share, but like, dude, we put 130,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet in 1 month. You can't pass up on an opportunity like that. 21 Mil says they should have never given the guidance. Hope proof of reserve is also never published for the same reason. That's an interesting take. I'm kind of ambivalent about proof of reserves. If they can make it happen without it being problematic, then I'm kind of fine with it. But yeah, I kind of view proof of reserves as more of like a marketing campaign for other companies that have it, and they can try to distinguish themselves from strategy and like, oh, look, invest in us because we have proof of reserves, don't invest in them. They don't even have proof of reserves, man. Yeah, I'm not really bothered by proof of reserves myself either. What's up, Ben? Maybe they'll stop announcing the source of their buys altogether and move to monthly acquisition updates. Imagine that chaos. Yeah. Yeah, they could throw a little bit of chaos into the mix. That would be fun. I wouldn't mind a little bit of chaos. Correction, 349,000. See how simple it was to correct a mistake. Why make it so difficult? That's funny. Bitcoin, what's up, BB? Someone saved my January 1080s. Yeah. January, let's see, if we get the October, November pump, the Januaries, I would probably roll in October. So we're going to need to, yeah, I don't know if I could. Oh, man. Yeah, it's going to be tough. I already started buying the January 1080s, but I'm kind of looking beyond January to February and March at this point. Maybe I am revenge betting. 21 mil says Satoshi was smart, said I don't have time to explain and just went away. Yeah, what if I had episode 444 and I just disappeared after that shit? I just Satoshi'd myself. Like schedule episode 445 and then just left it scheduled on YouTube and never went live again. Dead people who never sell will outtrade every single one of them. That is probably true. What's up, Andre? Mechanics videos are great, extremely based and highly intelligent, dude. He's on Team Knots. Yeah, I've been trying to pump Team Knots every chance I get. I mentioned them on my interview with Tim Kotzman the other day on the digital conference. Interviewed Mechanic on True North Now, and yeah, so we've been, some of my guys that I met up with in Vegas. We've got some spam arguments going on, some interesting spam conversations, and it's funny because I follow like Matthew Cratter's channel, and I like watching Mechanic, and and Luke Dasher's. As far as I can tell, I didn't really know of him until I started researching the spam, and apparently he was responsible for making sure that Bitcoin didn't hard fork back in the day. I think it was like SegWit or something, and so he's got a lot of credibility as well. But these other guys, they have their champions too, like Andre. I'm gonna fuck up his last name, Antonopoulos, and some other guys. So I was like, yeah, we're all choosing our champions out here, and finding the voices that basically are telling us what we want to hear. Who was it that said? I think I was listening to Dave Smith on Part of the Problem, and so this is me trying to quote him, quoting someone else, and it was actually, I think he was quoting Kennedy when he was running for president, and he said something along the lines of when he would sue the EPA or whatever for or sue a company for polluting the environment, both sides would bring up experts and they would say the exact opposite. So if you want to be Team Core, Team Knots, you can go and find some influencer or celebrity or someone that's an OG Bitcoiner, and you can find someone on either side of the argument if you want to appeal to authority or whatever. And at some point, though, you have to just decide for yourself. Buffalo says, let it burn. We don't need no fire. Let the motherfucker burn. Oh, excuse me. We don't need no fire. We don't need no water. Metaplanet publishing their proof of reserves is very credible. What's up, Deeply? William says, what are your thoughts on having STRF on margin as a hedge to strategy? So margin is dangerous to begin with. I mean, I'm using it. I kind of swore off margin after November. I slept a lot better. I thought my margin use was pretty responsible, but it didn't occur to me how much stress left my shoulders when I ditched my margin use. I wanted to invest in Swan a month or two ago, so I dipped into margin again, and I kind of haven't been able to really clear that up. What I should have done is when strategy hit 450, I should have just cleared all my margin use, dumped a bunch of leverage. But it was just that little taste of FOMO, like, oh yes, finally, we're gonna, 450, we're gonna blast their all-time highs. This is it, selling man go away be damned, like we're going to the moon again. And then it was like, wah wah wah, let down. So just kind of kicking the can down the road on profit taking. All right, so what does that look like, right? I don't have dry powder. I've got not only do I not have dry powder, but I've 60 grand worth of margin use here, which is fine for an account this size. That's not an irresponsible use of margin by any means. But so for me, the only way that I can either leverage or deleverage would be to sell some of my unleveraged position, which would actually be at a loss. My average trade price, apparently, after I rebalanced on my strategy shares, is actually 360. So, I guess I could call this tax loss harvesting even, but I would need to sell some unleveraged positions to buy more leveraged positions. And with the delta on the 250s being 0.79, and the fact that I was just alluding to, capitulation might mean seeing 250 again. This is probably the highest strike that I would be willing to purchase. And if we do crash down to 250, I would just be holding on for dear life at that point, like literally hodling. 225 or 200 strikes would be a little safer, so I'll take a look at them. But buying the 250s, I think, is probably reasonable. And so that's going to cost me, basically, let's just say 15 grand for one. So 30 grand for two. Selling 100 shares is going to get me 34 grand. So if I do that with 200 shares, I could get 4 covered calls. But do I want to go that hard right away? Probably not, because maybe. Let me just do it once and see what that does. I'll do it with 100 shares, and I'll see what that gets me. All right, so what was it, 34 grand? All right, so if I go out here and I nab, and just for convenience sake, I'm going to get the exact same strike and expiration date, so I have less positions to manage. Let's do, so it's December of 2026, 250 strikes. Two of them cost me, really, it's only two, oh, it says 26 grand, but I think that's just the margin use. Let me see this again. Yeah, $29,000 debit. So I'm getting a tiny little margin credit, or in buying power, I suppose. So that leaves me with an extra 5 grand to spend. I could just go ahead and say that let's like just let that cut my margin use down a little bit. But that also gives me the right now to sell 2 more covered calls, right? Because now I have 6 long call positions. So let's knock that out, because that's going to give me a little bit more credit as well. Same deal. I might as well just, well, no, because I'm probably going to be ending up moving these down for a credit as well. Maybe I should do that first. I sold 4 covered calls for $1,100 at the 425 strike, 38 days to expiration, only 5 days ago, and it's already worth, in 1 week, it's worth less than half of what I sold it for. So these need to get rolled. And I'm not going to roll the expirations because, unfortunately, even though I would be able to get exactly 45 days to expiration because it's Tuesday, they haven't released the October, like October 2nd or something. October 10th? No, October 3rd. Yeah, they haven't released the October 3rd and October 10th weeklies. So that's kind of annoying. But I'll just go ahead and roll these up to the expected move, or close to the expected move. I think 400 is a nice number. Nice whole number. Nothing terribly scientific about it. And then let's just make sure that well, I should have made sure of that already to begin with. But a safe poor man's covered call strike, you can approximate it. If you take the long call strike, add it to the cost of the long call, we'll just round that to 150. So as long as I'm selling the 400 strike, 250 plus 150, I should be good to go. And I end up exactly, that's where I went. 395 would actually have been fine because you get to also add in the cost of the call that you sold in there. So technically I probably could have sold the 390 or the 395. So let me just sell 2 more of these bad boys for the 2 new ones the 2 new poor man's covered calls that I just bought. And let's ungroup. And let's add these all together so I can keep it straight. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention to these. So 300 plus 120 is actually 420. So these are not like absolutely super safe, but it's actually going to be close enough. I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. But so these were constructed almost perfectly, and I could have been a little bit more aggressive with these, but apparently I was a little bit too aggressive with the 300s. So averaging them out, these are probably fine. Same deal with the 14 covered calls that I have here. These are all worth less than half of what I sold them for, even though they've only been on for 5 days. So I'm going to roll strikes down. Since these are shares, I can literally sell any strikes that I want. So just to keep them a little bit separate, maybe I'll only roll down to the 405. Or I could roll down a little farther to the 395. Yeah, I'll get a little bit more aggressive with it. All right, so that's going to chip away at another $6,000 worth of margin use. I'm kind of liking the direction where that's going. But at the same time, let's just take a look at the chart. I've got the 50 and the 200-day moving average here. So you can see we're actually below the 200. That the last time that happened apparently was April. And we haven't stayed there very long. Does that mean that we won't go below the 200 and stay there for some period of time? Extended period of time? No. Especially if Bitcoin stays down, then strategy is going into the toilet. But if I still think that we're in a Bitcoin bull market, I'm going to call this temporary. And, I'm not going to come out and necessarily call the bottom. What did I say? We could see 250 again. That would be way down here. That would be absolutely brutal. That would be absolutely painful as fuck to see 250 again, that far below. Anyway, but just because it seems impossible doesn't mean that I should assume that it can't happen. But if it does, I'll peel off another 200-300 shares, and I probably wouldn't let myself go below my core 1,000 shares in this account. I've got another 400 or 500 shares in another account as well. But, just in case the bull market is over, I'm going to cling to my core position of shares. So if we see 325, 315, I would probably peel off another 100 to 200 shares. And if we see sub 300s, I would do it again, maybe down to 1,000 shares. But that would pretty much break my spirit at that point. I wouldn't want to sell too much below my my core position. So I took a bunch of credits there and chipped away at my margin use. But in degenerate fashion, yeah, I think I started adding February position. Wait, why do I have a February? I have a February 9/10. Is that the top of the chain? You have too many positions when you can't even remember taking the position. What's my cost basis on these things? Okay, so my trade price was $800 a pop. I must have started buying the Januaries because, or excuse me, the Februaries because December and January were too close for comfort. Yeah, there's only 150 trading days to January. So yeah, I guess I started buying the Februaries. So maybe I'll just buy I'll just dip a toe in there and buy like 2 more. I just collected like 10 grand in premium. So I'll just I'll spend one of those thousands and I will, I'll call it good. Previously I had 62 grand in margin. Now I'm down to 49,000 in margin. So I was able to add some leverage, but also reduce my margin use. So I think that was kind of cool. Okay. I think everything is where I need it to be here. We'll move on. All right, this is the IRA. Same deal. These need to get rolled down. Wait, do I have poor man's covered calls or shares here? So I've got a combination. I've got 200 shares and I've got 4 poor man's covered calls. The poor man's covered calls are pretty aggressive. These only expire in January, and they're the 350 strikes. So these damn things are not even in the money anymore. This makes it very hard to sell poor man's covered calls against. It looks like I chose poorly with these. If we were to see, if we were to see 250 price on strategy, these things are just absolutely gutted, unfortunately. However, same ballpark, add 350 to 50, I get 400. So I should be able to roll all of these down to the 400 strike. Can actually roll to 395, but that's, yeah, this one's fine. All right, that gives me $2,000 to play with. I'm usually pretty aggressive in my IRA because it's going to be quite a while before they let me touch this money anyway without a tax penalty. And I'm kind of like even wondering what's the point of a traditional IRA, because they say, oh yeah, put this, you'll collect the money later when you're in the lower tax bracket. And I'm like, I'm getting wealthier every year. I'm never going to be in a lower tax bracket. So a traditional IRA kind of doesn't even make any fucking sense for anyone who's like continuing to make money forever. Oh well. If this was a Roth, I guess it would be a different story, but it ain't. So Tesla's just doing whatever. So this is probably nothing for me to do right now, but wait. And I could even argue that maybe I should sell some of my Tesla positions, which have not cratered, and buy the dip on strategy. That's kind of been the point of having two positions so I can pairs trade them. So let's see where I am. I've got 200 shares. 2 covered calls. I got 3 poor man's covered calls set up. Okay. They're trading very similar prices, so I could basically just trade 100 shares of Tesla for 100 shares of strategy. And close 1 and 1. Between that and the $2,000 I just collected gives me enough to buy 100 shares of strategy. So let's do that. Oops. No buying power, but that lets me sell one more covered call. So let's add another at the 400 strike. Leaves me with 900 bucks in buying power. So why do I have a June 960? That's wild. It's only been open for 28 days. Why did I buy that? That wasn't even, oh, I don't have to worry about taxes in this account anyway. So yeah, who gives a shit about long-term cap gains? I could buy one, I suppose. Oh, sorry, that's Tesla. Here we go. I still got a bunch of the Januaries. So, you know what? Let me move on to. So, if we get the pump in November again, that means I would have to go to at least February. Can I get two? No, I can only get one. What the Januaries cost? And I've already got a bunch of them. Yeah, I might as well just pick up like 3 more. Yeah. Just dollar costing, averaging the fuck out of these January 1080s. Okay. If they don't hit by October, maybe I'll roll them to March. Something like that. Yeah. All right. So all the buying power is gone. Move on to the spending account. Same deal here. I've got the poor man's covered calls, but again, I chose poorly on the long strike. So rolling these down to the 400 will get me a small credit. This account's basically like Vegas money. So I'm being as irresponsible as I like in this one. Let's group these back up. What did that give me? Let's see, 900 bucks. So, I think I'm done. I think I'm done dollar cost averaging into these Decembers. So with 900 bucks, I think I can get 1 February. Is that what the price? Oh, maybe even March. Maybe even April. April would get me to January before. Oh no, they only have the 540s for April. So let's do 910. 320. All right, we'll keep that in cash. Probably need to shuffle all this stuff around. This is still a challenge account. There's no real reason for this to be separate anymore, really. But it's still stuck in this account. Unfortunately, I can't do internal transfers of positions without filling out a form. I can only transfer cash. So that's kind of annoying. But I think yeah. So I sold these weeklies. These are already worth I've only had them on for 1 day, but these are already worth almost nothing. So I'm going to close these. And I'm still bag holding on 200 shares, which I usually don't do. But just in case we rebound, I'm only going to put 2 of these back on at the 360. Okay. There we go. That's just going to give me a little bit of buying power. Not much to even really speak of, but enough to buy another another January 1080. Oh, but I gotta roll these down too. Anyway, double quick check. So I've got the 200 strikes longs. That would mean I would need to sell the 360 or higher strike. That's pretty easy to do. And then I've got the 250s. I would need to sell the 370 or higher. So I can pretty much roll this down to any strikes I want. So I'll just go ahead and roll these to the expected move. It's pretty aggressive with those strikes, especially on a down day. But I'm okay with it. I've got so much. I've got so many long positions. This is completely fine. Okay, so I've got all my poor man's covered calls covered. I've got 2 of my 400 shares covered. Should I sell 100 of those shares and do 2 more poor man's covered calls? I'll wait. I'll wait for the dips to dip more, potentially. But that did put some more buying power in my pocket. I'm not going to go too hog wild with it though, but let me just add 2 more January 1080s. And then I'll keep the rest as cash. Might have to pay some more bills. The old lady's in Phoenix on a girls' trip, so who knows how much money she'll be spending. Yeah, I think I already did make withdrawal, so I probably have the cash settled balance is probably the true balance. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah, so I'm bag holding on 200 shares for now. Oh, but I think I never answered your question. Strife on margin as a hedge to strategy. I mean, if interest rates come down, STRF should pump. So in that sense, but lower interest rates should be good for strategy as well. I've never owned any of the preferreds yet, so it would probably be hard for me to comment. So this account has tons of leverage. So this one's getting hammered big time, down 20% since last week, which is to be expected when the majority of the account's value is in this poor man's covered call here. But probably in a similar situation. So I sold the 420 for 11. It's worth 5. So I'm going to roll it. Not to 59 days. Let's do 38 days. But I'll roll it down to approximately the expected move. I can't remember what exactly it was, but we'll do the 395. That should put a couple of $100 of buying power in the account, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really be eating a hole in my pocket. I had used like almost to the dollar of my buying power anyway, so I think I'll probably just stand pat there. Everything else expires like this Friday or later, so nothing really to do here. Yeah, I think that's it for today. So yeah, price down, shit day, red day. But really, same shit, different day for me personally. I wish they could all be green days, but wishing is not a strategy. All right, appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I'll see y'all tomorrow night on the True North call. Be good, y'all.